Welcome to the Beau Show. Joe Rogan is a comedian, a podcast trailblazer, and a mixed martial arts enthusiast and commentator. He's been involved in many facets of the entertainment industry with great success, but he carved his own path and he followed his instincts, which I respect. I want to discuss some of Joe's beliefs and commentary because he's become an unintended influence on social and societal commentary and even politics with his inquisitive and perhaps cynical mindset. I was watching an interview in which he was the interviewee rather than in his usual position interviewing others on a show called Breaking Points with Crystal Ball and Sagar Enjeti, where he covered a lot of ground, and I'll dip in and out of this interview to analyze. Joe Rogan pretty much invented the concept of the 3-hour podcast, which seems like it would be almost laborious with people's very, very short attention spans. But Rogan used this long-form format so that he could delve into the complexity of subjects. We all know that cable news looks for that quick soundbite for clickbait to entice you. But Rogan likes the twists and turns of deep conversation in a rather flighty, conversation-less world. Rogan never lit down into one place for too long, so his views never got bogged down by any one place or one population. I identify with this, having lived for periods of time in Memphis, Nashville, Chicago, Los Angeles, DC, and now Florida. When you live all over like that, you get a varied taste of people, but never enough to be overly influenced. And it gives you an opportunity to hear others' opinions and solidify or modify your own. I've lived in conservative cities and I've lived in liberal cities. I've been surrounded by musicians, actors, surfers, CEOs, wait staff, and politicians. So I feel like I've heard from a diverse cross-section of people. Rogan never really self-promoted his podcast. He just kept doing it and probably got better and better. But everything about his podcast was organic in its growth. The seed of this idea for the podcast format, according to Rogan, was Howard Stern and how he was just himself, for better or for worse, even in spite of the FCC fines. Like Stern, Rogan wanted to be authentic in the world of showbiz, where everything is fake or has some sort of agenda. First, I want to focus on his thoughts on the entertainment industry, because it's an industry that I've engaged in for many, many years and devoted my life and training to. Joe has some very insightful thoughts that struck a chord with me. And I want to try to use both his commentary and my own to explain questions that have gone unanswered for me in my own pursuit of television and film. It will perhaps enlighten you on why Hollywood is the way that it is, and why it has such powerful influence, and in some cases, why it fails to change hearts and minds. Joe Rogan says that he first became sort of politically aware in the Reagan years, when Reagan said that he didn't remember whether he had sold arms to Iran. He felt something was innately wrong about that. I don't think Rogan belongs to any political party, and he doesn't strike me as a partisan guy. Perhaps he's more classically liberal, rather than the progressive Democrats that don't embody that kind of liberalism. More specifically, though, I think Rogan is a natural cynic, and he recognizes that back in the 70s and 80s, that the vitriol had not approached the fever pitch where it is today. For instance, he says that the hatred for Ronald Reagan is nowhere close to the hatred for Donald Trump. And I think he's correct about that. But Rogan has been in Hollywood for a while, so he's been able to observe it and thread that fine needle of being in that world while not being of that world. It's a hard thing to do because Hollywood has become synonymous with politics and partisanship, as evidenced by activism and award shows, which continue to decline in ratings. No one is interested in their little chit-chat club anymore. There was a time when getting an Oscar was a very revered honor. The Academy actually rewarded great performances. But now everything is about diversity and quotas and the latest activist trend, so that the statuettes may go to someone who may legitimately be talented, but they're receiving the award for whatever minority or identity group that they represent. Award speeches stopped thanking their families and agents and began to be partisan diatribes. Even some of the greatest actors and actresses gladly put on these partisan masks at the awards podium before being played off by the orchestra. So here's Rogan talking about Hollywood and why the culture there breeds conformity.
This is the problem not just with Hollywood, but also with Los Angeles, because Los Angeles is inexorably connected to show business. There is no getting around that. It's the reason why a large percentage of people move there, and it also massively affects the politics of the place, and not just politics, but social discussions, the way people communicate, because it's an incredibly disingenuous way of communicating, where you want to say the things that people are going to want to hear, because that way they're going to cast you. So here's the thing. You take these people, and generally speaking, people come to Hollywood if they have an acting dream. That's the big reason why, right? That's like probably the number one. There's comics, they come there and they're different, but not necessarily, because a lot of them get into acting and they get like corrupted by that system too. But the way this system works is you go there and then you go into a room like this one. So like maybe we could be the casting directors, and someone would come in and you go, "Hey Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you move from?" And there's like a smugness to it and a weirdness to it, because they have power over you. And they're like, "Well, I'm from New Jersey, but been acting. I did a bunch of plays and blah blah blah, and I'm out here trying it out." "Okay, Mark. Well, you're gonna read for the role of Ted," and then like some fucking PA will read off a thing. "Well, Ted, I don't even know if we can do this, man. It just seems like it's all wrong." And you're like, "Come on, man, we can do it." And so you're in this. I've done this so many times. You're in this like completely
like a hotel
non-natural environment. It's usually a conference room in a production office, and you're in this non-natural environment with these smug people that have this massive amount of power over you, and it shapes the way people communicate. Like I've been in rooms where they'll discuss politics like right away, and you see people bend to whichever way the wind is blowing. Like, what do I have to say?
What are they wanting me to say?
I think it's about time we had a woman president. Like they'll say shit.
Like,
well, you see it. You see the They don't have opinions.
What Rogan is describing here is absolutely accurate. There's a smugness and a power dynamic to casting rooms, because you have a bunch of people sitting there, sipping their lattes, waiting for the next wannabe to come in there and impress them. And because those people have gone whichever the way the wind is blown to be in that circle, therefore any actor or actress coming in there to get the job is also just as impressionable. You've heard the phrase, "sell your soul to the devil," and that's correct. These guys would do whatever it takes to get the part, including the casting couch. Rogan accurately describes the dynamics of a culture of conglomerate opinions created in an environment based upon rejection. So in order to reject the rejection or to avoid it, they will say whatever others believe in order to be accepted. He expounds further.
That's what shapes the entire mindset of that part of the country. The entire mindset of that part of the country is doing things that you think other people will like. Right. Imagine a hellscape of a world where everyone in the business, in one business, everyone is liberal. How is that possible? How is that possible? How is it possible when the country is basically divided 50-50? So you're telling me that everyone who is everyone who's creative? Is it everyone who is expressive? Is it everyone who's theatrical? Is that possible? It's not possible, because it's not really opinions. They're willing to not have any opinions on anything else other than feeding narcissism, feeding this career that seems insurmountable and impossible to achieve. Because when you're thinking about someone wanting to be like an actor on a television show, you're like, what are the odds that you make it? It's so small.
Right.
Like there's so many people in Hollywood that never make it.
And so this kind of answered the question I had pondered for years, which is, why is it that the entire industry is 100% liberal? Well, it isn't. It's a created illusion, or perhaps a delusion. It's the inauthenticity of a forced mindset. And I will add that the industry is not 100% liberal at all. But those who think differently have been forced into silence. They will not say anything to upset the apple cart, or more importantly, their careers. Sure, you have John Voight and James Woods, but they are in the sunset years of their careers. They would probably never speak out if they were just starting out. Conservatives and libertarians have to either shut up or meet behind closed doors to vent and to talk about politics, which is funny because, like Rogan says, the quote-unquote liberals of Hollywood don't even know why they are liberal. They don't have a bedrock of beliefs. They just conformed because they wanted to fit in. They based an entire worldview on hating Bush and then hating Trump even more. That's not a worldview. That's a BS conformist trend. So Rogan makes a great point. Are all artists or creatives truly liberal? No, I'm not. But I've also elected to speak out, probably to the detriment of some aspects of my career. I know one very liberal director who rejected me outright, meaning he wouldn't even permit me to audition for his project because he assumed, and I have to stress assumed because he never asked me questions or did any research, that I was some hardcore right-winger. He said that if he couldn't sit down and have a drink with someone, he wouldn't cast them. Well, okay, but here's the problem with that. He has already prejudged the sit-down. How do you know if you can have a drink with somebody if you haven't even made an effort to sit down with them? Along the line of conformity, here's a great example of the intolerable BS that celebrities come up with.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try.
No hell below us.
Above us only sky.
Imagine all the people
Living for today. Yeah.
Imagine there's no countries, yeah.
It isn't hard to do.
Nothing to kill or die for. And no religion too.
There is not one beneficial outcome from this. And even the way CBS titled this video, 25 celebrities sing Imagine in a moving montage. Moving? I don't think so. It was in 25 different keys. It was the musical version of 25 kids coloring in the same coloring book. Piggybacking off of the intolerable faux culture of Hollywood, Rogan talks in a candid way about social media and tribalism that it has created.
It's like we were talking about with Elon or with money earlier. It's attack vectors.
Yeah.
It's finding a thing to attack you on. And when people can't, when there's nothing to attack, they attack things and then they justify that that's something that they should attack.
Right.
When you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And one of the things about social media is that people generally look to complain about things, whether it's to complain about people or it's to complain about the state of politics or the climate or whatever the fuck it is. Like, you get the most juice out of complaining about things. And the algorithms recognize that obviously as well, which is why the algorithms recognize that the things that people interact with most are the things that they hate. So those are the things that people go after.
This was a unique take on this because I've always wondered how social media adapts to a person's interest. And when the whole platform conforms to a person's taste, which are based upon hatred or hammering the nail, then they give you more nails to hammer. It becomes a cycle of negativity, which, as intoxicating as that is not mentally good for any of us. I think social media has also bred a generation of keyboard warriors. Not the types of people that would ever debate you publicly, but people who hide behind the comfort and safety of their keyboard and somehow feel good about taking a person down. It's like schadenfreude. I think we also have to face the fact that social media, especially TikTok, has bred a generation of people who all want to be vloggers and influencers. But not influencers the way Joe Rogan is, because these vloggers have no demonstrable talent. They want to choose the easiest path, which is to do a dance or a challenge or a kissy face in a bikini or a montage where their outfit changes to the beat of the music, and let that be their talent. I'm sorry, that's not talent. That is an influence. That is artificial algorithmic copycat nonsense. None of these so-called influencers could hold a 3-hour dialogue, much less a 3-minute dialogue. What I truly enjoy about my show is being able to speak in a semi-extended format about a topic or wide variety of topics and really dive in deep. But when you have Chinese technology gripping the culture by its untalented cojones, you breed cloned ignorance. I think that social media has created this short-form attack culture. On other shows I've been on, I've simply been interrupted or cut off because those that I was debating did not want to have a long-form respectful debate. It's easier to cut someone off than it is to have an open conversation, particularly if you are inept, feeble, emotional, and low information. When it comes to career, Rogan talks about the risks you have to take to steer your own course and write your own path, such as his own foray into podcasting was a risk, just like anything else. Take a listen.
You have the right morals and ethics. You have a great insight to politics and to the social issues, and yet you're still worried.
Yeah.
You're still scared.
Right.
We were
Right?
terrified.
Yeah, we're
Now,
petrified.
now
man.
imagine if you're making $15 an hour and you have children to feed.
I don't know what
And
you do.
you have a dream. You have a risk.
Yeah.
You have a thing to do, and you're scared. And a lot of people would advise you to not take any risks in that situation, and that might be good advice because everybody's got a unique situation. Everybody's situation is totally, completely unique, and it's hard always. But my advice is always, you have to think of your life in terms of, first of all, it's a temporary situation. You have a finite amount of time, and it can be a good time or it can suck. And if it sucks, you have to fight to change it as if your life depends on it, because it really does. It really does. The quality of your life depends on it. The quality of the experience depends on it. And you've got yourself into a bad situation. Like,
I agree wholeheartedly with Joe here because I've been in positions in the course of my career where, let's say, I've been a bartender because that enabled me the free time that I needed to hone my craft. But at the same time, I was conversing with people of all walks. To me, bartending was never about serving drinks. It was about talking to new friends and making myself a more well-rounded person. Furthermore, when I was chosen to be on a particular TV opportunity that I thought would be amazing, where I could really, really shine, it was miserable. While I certainly enjoyed challenges, this became highly unhealthy mentally because it was a constant knife to my psyche. But people who want to carve a path for themselves have to take certain risks. And some people will play it safe. I feel like almost everything I've ever done has been a risk because Rogan is right that rejection becomes a normal part of life in the entertainment world. And that's hard. But thankfully, I've taken something positive away from each experience, even the miserable ones. And I've been able to pivot and shift and apply those nuggets that I learned to new opportunities. I also like the mentality Rogan has on getting better and better and better just by grinding away. He doesn't claim to have any goals other than getting better at what he does, whether that's as a UFC commentator, a stand-up comedian, or his podcast. He feels as though he needs to struggle to keep this quest going.
having things that I know I'm committed to, that I know are brutal, and you either do it or you don't do it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Mm-hmm. Those things keep you grounded. Those things keep you rooted in the reality of the struggle. And I think that if you do, I just think everybody has a different personality. Everybody has a different mindset and a different perspective on life. But from my perspective, with me as a human being, like me personally, I cannot be happy unless I'm struggling. I have to have physical struggle. I have to have mental challenges. I have to have things that I'm doing, that I'm working on, trying to be better at. And as long as I do those things, then I can appreciate all the other things better. Then I'm a more loving husband and father and friend, and I'm better as a neighbor. I'm better at all those things because I take care of all my bullshit. And I think there's a lot involved in that.
I relate to this as well because I find myself constantly challenging myself to new things and new experiences and new relationships. I enjoy the work and getting better. I think it's admirable to keep pushing yourself and never resting on your laurels. There's constant self-improvement in that. And let's face it, we can all work on something within ourselves. We are never perfect at anything. If it takes 10,000 hours to become a master at something, as Malcolm Gladwell says, we all have a ways to go. Rogan is known for making observations on politics that can be misinterpreted sometimes. For instance, he says that some have considered him alt-right for saying bad things about Biden, but I think Rogan is pretty fair, and he only wants to interview people that he thinks are legitimately genuine, and will do it on his own terms. He made this recent observation about Donald Trump.
Is he trying again?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he's going to 100% try.
Yeah.
He's probably going to win.
You think so?
How is Joe Biden going to win? How is it possible that he's going to beat anybody? After you've seen him speak, after you've seen the decay and the decline, how is it possible?
It's not very inspiring.
They've done a terrible job. The Democrats fucked up royally by making that guy the president. That's probably what Trump wanted too.
This is probably how he could be seen or misconstrued as a conservative or a rightist, but he's not taking a partisan stance. He's just making the obvious statement that the Democrats blew it when they nominated an obviously feeble Biden. He can see that the energy would be on Trump's side, especially after all of Biden's unforced errors. And he's right. And I think the usual conservative suspects seized on this statement considering how influential Rogan is. But that's the low-hanging fruit. Not everything has to be a partisan statement. But what Joe Rogan does that most conservative media figures are inept at is having a more 360-degree dialogue. He has on Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang and Bernie Sanders. And he talks with them for hours. A wider swath of people listen to that kind of thing because when is the last time you heard someone have a 3-hour dialogue? Most interviewers come in with an agenda because they want that soundbite so badly, or in the case of the mainstream media, they throw softballs to a guy like Biden because he's obviously compromised. Rogan is able to captivate both the wealthy and the struggling. And I think it's his non-assuming, cynical demeanor and his observations. He clearly has opinions, but they weren't formed from biased cloth. If we watch Sean Hannity or Don Lemon conduct an interview, we already know what they're going to say before it comes out of their mouths. With Rogan, we're not really sure. He's had very interesting conversations with people like Dan Crenshaw and Elon Musk. He has perfected this art form, where other guys would probably be saying, I'm sorry, we have to go. Thanks for coming on the show. And that type of dialogue actually serves a purpose because it forces long-form, extensive conversation where you actually have to listen. Short-form convos require little effort and little listening. Long-form requires you to be attentive and curious. In a way, Rogan is setting an example for others to follow in terms of the types of dialogue we should have. Joe Rogan has been successful in UFC, in comedy, and his podcast, and that is to be admired and commended. He's taken risks and a path led by instinct and enjoyment. I like the fact that he just says what he wants and does what makes him happy. I think he creates a challenge within us all to think a bit more deeply about subject matter and people, and tried to shine a spotlight on authenticity in a vapid world and culture. I've enjoyed many of his podcasts with guests such as Jordan Peterson and Brett Weinstein. He just released a very powerful video about freedom, especially in light of all these recent vaccine mandates. And I think people need to see it. It's another way Rogan is helping to elevate the conversation and make you think about things deeply rather than accept a narrative. Here it is.
As soon as you give politicians power, any kind of power that didn't exist previously, if they can figure out a way to force you into carrying something that lets you enter businesses or lets you do this or lets businesses open, historically, they are not going to give that power up. They find new reasons to use it.
I'll be back.
We have to protect those freedoms at all costs, whether you agree with people's choices or not, because it is the foundation that this country was founded on. Freedom. This idea of freedom, there's so many people that think it's frivolous, it's not important, it's not the main thing that we should be focused on, but it is the literal structure that allows this country to be so fucking amazing. Every single country that's ever existed other than the United States. Up until 1776, every fucking country that has ever existed was run by dictators. All of them. This is the first experiment in self-government that actually worked, and it created the greatest superpower the world's ever known. It created the greatest cultural machine, the greatest machine of art and creativity and innovation right fucking here. And how did it do that? It did it through freedom. And as soon as you see something, anything that comes along and inhibits your freedom, you should be very cautious of that thing. You should be very suspicious. Because anything that comes along that can inhibit your freedom is, by definition, anti-American.
Think about that kind of freedom and what that means. I'm Beau, and that's the show.